My God, this is just getting ridiculous. $100 billion. Nvidia and OpenAI are up to something crazy. And I feel like investors, news hubs, people all over the place are overlooking this deal heavily. I want to explain just how ridiculously OP this is right here. Let's go through the deal quickly. Why should you even care? Because you'll see it's absolutely insane. What's the harsh reality of who's winning, who's losing, who's looking to benefit from all this, and how much longer are we gonna continue to rant and bant about the AI growth story? Because I'll tell you right now, I'm getting sick of it, but it might not be going away anytime soon. So let's get started. As we all know, AI spending at this point is everything. If we lose AI spending, GDP, who knows? Only God knows what's going to happen to GDP, what's going to happen to the consumer, what's going to happen to the stock market. Everything's being held up by this AI spending. We all know it. We've talked about this at great lengths. AI capex investment is making up more GDP growth than consumer spending, which again is a problem because GDP is virtually 70% consumer spending. And today we have this little section right here contributing to more growth, this is our AI spending, than this entire section, the spending of the people who live in the country. And so I'd love to be the guy to tell you that the world from the consumer's perspective is getting better. I'm not so sure about that, but one thing I can promise you is that OpenAI and Nvidia are continuing to absolutely blow up this AI capex number with this $100 billion deal that actually equates to much more money than that. Let's take a look. I saw a lot of comments out there saying, well, isn't this just Nvidia investing $100 billion in OpenAI and then OpenAI buying $100 billion worth of Nvidia chips? And no, it's actually a lot better for Nvidia than that. So we know Nvidia plans to invest $100 billion total over the next X years. We don't exactly know that number yet. However, what we do know is that Nvidia plans to deploy this money on $10 billion cadences for every 1 gigawatt of data center build out that OpenAI deploys. Now, to really see how ridiculous this deal is, we have to look at, well, what does it cost to build out 1 gigawatt of data center? And actually, Jensen Huang has already told us that. He told investors on an earnings call this exact number. Well, it was an estimation, a range. Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang told investors last month the construction of 1 gigawatt of data center capacity, is what we just looked at, costs between $50 to $60 billion. Nvidia's chips, just Nvidia alone, their chips and systems account for about $35 billion of that cost. So let's process that for a second here. Let that sink in. For every $10 billion that Nvidia is investing into OpenAI for them to build out 1 gigawatt of data center, OpenAI is going to spend $35 billion on Nvidia supplies alone, including everything. Jensen has essentially guaranteed $350 billion in revenue over however many years this project ends up taking. $350 billion in revenue. Guaranteed. Now, I guess it's not completely guaranteed because this number could change depending on the pricing of Nvidia chips, Nvidia Server X. Nvidia right now can price them at just about whatever they want. They have the best pricing power of any company of all time, probably. So this number could vary upwards. It could drift downwards. We don't know, but let's just say for right now, it's sitting around $350 billion. Oh, and by the way, Nvidia made about $130 billion in total revenue in their fiscal year 2025. So you can just see how absurd this number is. I mean, you're guaranteeing essentially 3 years of the annual revenue we just saw. Anyways, getting away from Nvidia, let's look at the bigger problem here. We know Nvidia is the king of AI. We know that they design the chips. They don't even manufacture the chips. So they have very high margins and they can sell these chips at virtually whatever they want. So what's the bad news about this deal and about the industry in general? Well, for starters, we need to build a little bit of context of just how much data center infrastructure build out is happening right now. Because the question starts to arise, and we'll get to it in a little bit more detail, but do we actually need all this data center infrastructure? Are we potentially overbuilding, building out too much supply? Is there demand to fill out all of this supply? So just for starters, 10 gigawatts of power, the projected total capacity of this OpenAI Nvidia data center partnership, could power 6 to 8 million homes based on United States estimations. So we're talking about, a lot of power. And we can see that this trend of investing in data center build out, in AI data center infrastructure, it's not going away, right? Clearly, it's moving in only one direction, and that's up. And it's accelerated drastically since the rollout of ChatGPT and the realization that, hey, we need more power to train LLMs and to inference LLMs, to use them. Now, I don't want to belabor the point too much here. I just released a video all about the Oracle stuff and how their projections are absolutely nuts. So check that out if you're interested. But during their earnings call, they projected that they're going to see cloud infrastructure revenue basically 14x from 2025 to 2030. That's roughly like a 70 to 80% CAGR, compounded annual growth rate. We're talking growth rates here comparable to, you guessed it, the king of AI, Nvidia. But the point is, data center infrastructure investment is absolutely blowing up. We see it with Oracle, we see it with NBIS, we see it with Applied Digital, Iron, CoreWeave. You get the point. Every single data center company that even speaks about or mentions the connotation AI data center infrastructure, their stock has absolutely skyrocketed over just the past 6 months. And that's based on the assumption, based on the projection that these AI large language models, these AI softwares are going to need more AI compute. But the question again remains, are those goals attainable? I think this picture does it best, right? We have Jensen Huang in the background here, the absolute king of the AI space, overlooking this road that all these companies are taking to spend all their money, raise all the debt they possibly can, milk every dollar from every investor that's willing to pay to invest in more Nvidia chips and therefore build out more AI compute. And so here comes a reality check. And again, one thing to note is Jensen probably has the best pulse on this industry out of anybody. He sees the demand coming in on a day by day, hour by hour basis. He talks to all the higher ups and management at these various different data center companies. But again, at the end of the day, he kind of has a vested interest because the more chips he sells, the more revenue Nvidia brings in and the better the stock performs. Would Jensen Huang tell us if demand was looking a little sketchy, if data center build out was potentially building towards too much capacity, oversupply? We don't really know. But what we do know is Nvidia dominates the space. Who are the biggest benefactors from this OpenAI Nvidia deal? We know how the deal is structured. Nvidia is pretty much making a 2.5 to 3.5 times on their investment as OpenAI is going to buy from their AI compute. And again, the data says, why wouldn't you keep spending money? The trend is your friend. So let's just assume Nvidia is going to continue to dominate. No matter what happens, no matter what deals are made, Nvidia will be the biggest benefactor, no doubt. They have their proprietary software in CUDA that optimize the performance of these GPUs. But it's not just the software, it's the hardware side too. They package everything up beautifully into this end-to-end server infrastructure where they can really just plug and play supercomputers wherever they want. And if you're questioning what kind of pricing power Nvidia has, well, you can go buy yourself a GH200 Nvidia GPU right now for about $40,000. Subscribe if you want one of these. Who else? Who else is a player here? We have Big Daddy Nvidia, and then we have little baby AMD right here. Honestly, pretty much to scale of how much of the market they own. But the idea is the industry is run by the chip maker, Nvidia, the chip designer, I should say. And then we have the Sun column, the companies that really rely on Nvidia in just about every way possible to profit from their AI endeavors. We have the software companies like OpenAI. We have the cloud infrastructure companies like Oracle. We have the data center providers like CoreWeave. They all rely on dad to get around, to do really pretty much anything, and to be there for them when they need it most. This isn't inherently bad. A dad and a son can have a perfectly healthy relationship. But this is where things get a little scary, right? what happens when all the data centers are built out? Is there really going to be enough demand to max them out, to max out the capacity that's being built out right now? And we can see right here the rent rate of data center space, of data center compute. Of course, with time, with any technology, as innovation continues to power on through, you usually see a reduction in prices as technology gets more efficient, more productive, and you can spend less money and also get more results. Now, recently, obviously, because of this explosion in unanticipated demand, you can see the price for data center renting is increasing very quickly. Now, as this growth continues upward, these companies, specifically Oracle and CoreWeave, they can rent out to companies wanting to train their large language models, wanting to run their AI software. They can charge more and more, which makes them more profitable. But right now, we're supply constrained. We know this. In reality, we think this demand line is actually right here. It's going to stay straight forever, no matter what the supply is. And if demand stays high forever, well, then you can pretty much charge mercilessly however much you want. Crazy. Now, I think this is where the harsh reality sets in. We're kind of all under the assumption that demand's gonna stay infinitely high forever, right? The reality is demand may be here right now, very high, but eventually demand for AI compute will decrease. At least that's what's happened with every technology in the history of mankind, right? You just don't have enough profitable AI companies making use of all of this data center space. They simply just can't afford to use it anymore. And in that case, with supply very high, so supply shifts this way, we can see that the new price has dropped off significantly. We'll say price, harsh reality, HR. Now, this price would unfortunately set a lot of data center companies, a lot of AI software companies, would set them back pretty substantially, especially because a lot of these companies don't turn a profit. They don't even make money. They're being held up by debt, by investors, by you and I investing in them. In the case of OpenAI, we talked about this at great lengths in a video, how it's really causing a fundamental economic problem across the globe. OpenAI loses a lot of money, and that's justifiable right now because their revenue's growing so ridiculously fast. I think I saw they hit 100 million users in something like 2 months, the fastest technology to ever do so. And so obviously the adoption rate right now is crazy high. But what happens if their expectations of what people are willing to pay for, let's say, premium versions of ChatGPT or licensing out their software to bigger players, to bigger companies, and AI software wrappers, more or less? What happens if that stuff doesn't come to fruition? Well, if OpenAI goes down, which it shouldn't. At this rate, OpenAI has such a competitive advantage just because of their early mover advantage and access to seemingly endless capital. They're not money constrained right now, even though they say they are. This is a systemic risk to the overall tech industry, to the overall market. OpenAI sitting at a $500 billion valuation, and still retail investors don't have access to that. They once came out as a non-profit company, and now they are maximizing profit where they can, sending people to cheaper models where they can. So intentions have definitely changed, right? And like we said, it's not just OpenAI, it's Oracle projecting crazy growth. CoreWeave is projecting crazy growth. They put all their eggs in one basket, and that's the business model of buying Nvidia chips until you can't. You're gonna keep selling debt, take all the dollars you possibly can from public investors, from private investors, and you're gonna pour that money into more Nvidia Kool-Aid, right? That's just the business model that they have. And that's the business model that pretty much all these companies share. So the reality kind of is, as long as demand stays strong, then building out supply makes sense. But you tell me, is there such thing as infinite demand? Is there such thing as overbuilding data center capacity? If we learned absolutely anything from the dot-com bubble, it's that 95 to 99% of startups just aren't going to be around. They're not going to be able to turn a profit, and hence that will be reflected ultimately in their stock price. So again, just the AI industry in general is a house of cards. It works until it doesn't. If we lose this foundation, this baseline of investment that we're getting from private investors, public investors alike, then where does the money come from to hold up all this AI spending? And if AI spending goes away, then, oh God, what happens next? Only God knows. All right, I hope this was helpful. This deal by Nvidia is completely outrageous. We live in a crazy world. Money just sometimes doesn't even feel real when you're looking at figures this large. Are we in a bubble? I mean, you definitely could justify we're not, based on the investments, based on the money pouring into these companies right now. But I think it's undeniable that we're at least heading in that direction. The CoreWeave CEO said it himself. No bubble. I think the reality check is ahead, if not right around the corner, and Jensen Huang, as the omniscient figure of the AI space, is watching over and just examining how everybody fares, because no matter what, companies are buying the Nvidia chips, the Nvidia Kool-Aid. So let me know what you think. Did you realize the scale of this investment? Did you realize that Nvidia is essentially getting $350 billion of revenue just from this deal alone? That's essentially 3 years of 2025 revenue. So daddy's doing great, but son, I mean, I don't know. Do you think OpenAI, Oracle, and CoreWeave, are they well positioned? Who's the bag holder? At the end of the day, who gets screwed in the doomsday scenario? All right, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.